and welcome to the Social Power Lab podcast, brought to you by Folks Leadership Group. Welcome, everyone, to episode 2 of the Social Power Lab. Today, we're going to talk about the source forms of social power, because as we mentioned last time, power can fall into 3 different categories: the source forms, the composite forms, and the indirect composite forms. So today we're focusing on the source forms, which gives us a good foundation for understanding social power and how we utilize it in our day-to-day lives. And Dr. Amir, how are we doing tonight?
Hello, everyone. I'm great. How are you?
Doing good, doing good. And of course, we got Dr. Ted Vokes. How are you?
I am better than well, I'll say for sure. Good to go. Excited about talking about the building blocks of power in episode 2 here, the source forms. So that's our agenda. And I'm going to usurp everybody with a bit of a preamble of my own today
Oh,
too, going into
please do.
this. Um, in our first episode and in this one, indeed, we because we we really like hanging out with each other, and we like working with each other and all, and developing well what you're learning about here, theory, social psychological theory, and so we tend to be pretty lighthearted, and we do have a lot of fun together. But I also want to acknowledge something really, really important. As lighthearted as our discussions are going to be, um, uh, the subject of this podcast is actually deadly serious, and it is because of the period in history that we're all living in that is a direct derivative of everything social power. So what I mean by this, and my colleagues are well aware of this because we do this as a lead into most of our leadership training. I would say virtually all of it today. Humanity is sitting squarely within what the political scientists are calling a polycrisis. And it's a polycrisis of our own making. All of and what is a polycrisis? I'll get to that. It's a composite of many crises on the planet that are unfolding. And the difference between just a lot of crises at one time and a polycrisis is that the other crises that are happening, let's say political instability, climate change, economic uncertainty, and the change in the supply chains around the world, the shrinking back from globalization. All of these things are components of what is being described as a polycrisis, because the individual crises are starting to bounce off each other and affect each other in dramatic ways, and making it all the more complex to put our brains to try to address and solve. So this polycrisis, there have been polycrises in the past for humanity, but this polycrisis is one that, oh yeah, there's that little AI thing too that is entering the picture, that humanity really has never experienced before, because we are able to communicate it so rapidly, and we have so many other factors involved than any of the polycrises that have been identified in the past by historians and the political scientists. So it makes for conditions for each of our brains, which are absolutely not what brains like to experience. Brains really like things that are calm, certain, simple, and clear. But the political scientists tell us that this polycrisis creates a social environment that they describe as VUCA. And VUCA is an acronym for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So we didn't invent this, but boy, we certainly embraced it because it explains the experience of, I'd say, 8 billion people on the planet. Unless you happen to be living under a rock and are completely unaware. And that's okay too, if that's a choice somebody's making, but you probably wouldn't be listening to the podcast if you had. So the rest of us, we're living in this VUCA environment. And so instead of calm, we have volatility. Instead of certainty and predictability, we have uncertainty. In place of simple, we are living in a morass of complexity. And any clarity about society's direction has given way to huge degrees of ambiguity. The brain really hates this stuff. It's a cognitive miser. It does not like to expend more energy than it needs to in order to get through the day. It is the single most hungry organ in the body, 2% of our body mass, and it consumes up to 20-ish, maybe a little bit more than that, 20% of our caloric intake in a day. So it's a like to say it's a glucose sucking machine. So if the world's making you tired, you're not wrong. This is really demanding a lot of our brains, and brains don't love VUCA environments. VUCA environments don't go away quick, according to the lessons of history. They tend to last years and sometimes decades as opposed to weeks and months. So that's the context that we're operating within. And social power is the force that can address this polycrisis. And it is the force that has produced this polycrisis, as we will discuss. So that's why I say this is actually deadly serious. So we're going to continue to be lighthearted about that as much as possible. But I just want to point that out that we do take what we're talking about very seriously, and we do see the profound ramifications of the use and misuse, intentional abuse of social power. So we do that in our practice work, but we also, as applied social scientists, definitely do this on a very much broader scale as well. So that's. Anybody want to comment before I jump into the next phase here on VUCA and a polycrisis and all the rest of that?
I mean, yeah, you pretty much nailed it, right? And I remember when we started talking about that, um, specifically when the pandemic hit, and then it's cool how you mentioned AI and stuff because again, so many people are divided on it, right? And
Yeah,
it's just
yeah,
new realities emerging, and our brains just responding in different ways depending on who we are, and quite frankly, what are how we're using different forms of social power in our day to day life. So that's
truly.
something that yeah, but yeah, I mean, Amir, any comments there?
Yeah, just wanted to add that VUCA doesn't have to be a collective societal level phenomenon. It could happen to each of us individually.
Yes,
And when we go through tough times, it affects our behaviors, our emotional reactions, and people who are around us will be affected by that as well. Like the mechanism is obviously emotional contagion. So it's not just about like a big pandemic, for example. So we need to be careful about individuals as well. It doesn't always happen to everyone at once. So
yes, yeah. Most of us have had that perfect storm in our life where nothing is going right and it feels like the world's crashing in. That's a VUCA period for the brain on the individual level. For sure. Thank you for bringing that in, Amir. It's brilliant. Yeah. So that's the context, and that's one of the reasons that we, as a social entrepreneurship, define ourselves that way. That we want to put psychology in the hands of people that can use it because we get some really serious crap going on out there. Um, and So we do have a mission, and we're appreciative of you for listening to learn about this. So with that, we're going to launch into the source forms of power. There are five source forms. They could be thought of as the building blocks of power.
Mm.
The most elemental layer of it. These five combined in different ways to produce the remaining seven forms of power that we'll be talking about in each subsequent episode. So this one is source forms. Next one will be composite forms. There's another five there. And then in the following, we'll talk about indirect composite forms, which are really super cool.
Mm.
And indirect, but nonetheless extremely powerful when deployed towards our intended effects.
Yeah,
So,
so one quick question, Ted, before we dive into the
mhm,
source forms. Our viewers will see here that on the outside of our model we have this threat, highlighted in red, reward and
Yep.
neutral. Can you kind of break down what those vectors are for us quickly?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is the starting point because all 12 of these forms of power can be expressed in either a threat version, a reward version, or a neutral version, or a threat and reward version at the same time. We'll illustrate that. Um, and so all of the forms of power can be expressed this way. The original model from French and Raven, who we owe a great deal of credit for just coming up with the idea of forms of power, threat and reward are essentially thought of as forms of power. But we've reconfigured this as we've been studying this for the last 25 years or so, into understanding that these are the vectors via which power can be expressed. And so I'll talk about them in turn and ask you guys to flesh out some of the brain science behind them. But effectively, if we are trying to induce somebody through a power attempt to do something, any of these forms of power could be expressed as something of a threat or something of a reward. And my brain will acknowledge threat and reward through discrete systems within that. Who wants to take on telling us a bit about those systems before we dive into how they are experienced on the social level?
Ooh, I nominate Dr. Amir.
Go ahead, you are the best in this.
No, you're the best.
Oh, you just got a little. Well,
Just,
I just get on with it, director of brain shenanigans.
no,
Go
you
on.
hang up. Yeah. So, with the brain and how it relates to power with the reward and the alarm system. So the limbic system of our brain, which throughout evolution is our more reptilian brain, our more animalistic brain, right? Based on our emotions and survival instincts, fight or flight response, stuff like that. That's kept us alive and helped us, survive through evolution and survival of the fittest and all that jazz. This limbic system can be broken down into different components that have different roles in essentially our emotional experience of life. So, I guess we'll talk about the alarm system first, which is where we would feel a lot of the threat forms of power, right? Source forms, or any form for that matter, coming through the threat vector. The alarm system, we always say, rings louder than the reward system, right? So the alarm system which is essentially our amygdala, is our organ in the brain that triggers our fear response, and it's our emotion center, right? What is what the amygdala does. And this is the part of our brain where if you hear a door slam, you're going to automatically look at where that noise came from because you're going to unconsciously monitor for danger, right? It's the same when I don't know, if you're driving down the road and you see sirens, right? Your attention is going to be drawn to it because again you're monitoring for danger. So the amygdala and the alarm system, it's that's where we experience threat forms of power, right? If you threaten somebody with legitimate power, for example, which we'll break into, what that looks like more, being able to use your hierarchical authority, of, I don't know, let's say that it was a teacher and a student, right? I got kicked out of class a lot when I was a kid, so I'll use that as an example. But, the teacher being like, Adrian, get to the office right now, right? And that was a threat form of legitimate, right? It was justified, just
Yeah,
because,
but what, was she threatening you or was she threatening the office that
no, no, it
sorry, no,
was.
no,
I was picturing my male grade 8 teacher. He loved me, but it was, yeah, and that's the thing. The threat doesn't always mean like unethical or bad, right? It just means that in my psychology, I experienced it in the alarm system as a coercive form or a threat form. But the teacher was completely justified, right, in sending me to the office because I was yapping a lot or whatever. But yeah, so that's how that would work, right? Is you have the threat form kind of is processed in the amygdala. Now, on the inverse, you have the reward system, where we experience a lot of the reward forms of power, which the organ for it is the nucleus accumbens, which is essentially our system that has all of most of our dopaminergic activity, right? So this is the part of our brain that when we go and, play a slot machine at a casino and we win like a little amount of money and we see the lights shine up brightly and the music go on the slot machine, it's the part that makes us go, "Oh, I should put in more money and see if I can win more." Right? It essentially makes you want to pursue things that feel good. And it's the same with food or video games or like whatever you find enjoyable, right? The nucleus accumbens and the reward system is the system in place that helps us engage in pursuing those things, right? So same with evolution, just as the alarm system kept us alive through like protection and fight or flight, the reward system kept us pursuing, satiating sources of food or, you know, anything else we need for survival. Anything? Sorry, I heard a. Is there something brewing, my
No,
lads?
no, no, keep
No?
going.
Okay.
Keep going.
Yeah, so that's essentially, the limbic system, and then alarm system, reward system. That's where power is experienced. And you'll see as we go through our examples of the source form, how you can have multiple reward forms or threat forms kind of activated at one time, right? That's
Yes.
what's really interesting because we acknowledge that power exists in the relationship, right? So that that two-way street of the interaction of power, there could be a few different forms existing on that road at one time, right? It's almost like if you think of a highway, right? You can have 3-lane traffic, 2-lane traffic, 4-lane traffic if you're driving through Toronto. Yeah, so there's a lot that can be happening. But anything you guys want to add there, Amir? Anything?
Yeah, I just want to express why I'm a big fan of that neutral vector, because usually people who are very attuned to power dynamics, they usually tend to like interpret almost every interaction in terms of who has more or less control or power over other people. Like they're always thinking, okay, is this person above me or below me? Am I the boss or am I the subordinate? It's like they're always doing that power check because they think that, okay, it's important to even talking to the person, I know who is the boss or not. They really have difficulty in situations where hierarchy doesn't matter, and there are situations where hierarchy doesn't matter, and we should be comfortable with that. There is not a need to really establish your power or who is on top or on bottom in every situation. So this addition of neutral vector, I think, is very meaningful and important.
Yeah, and we actually missed the neutral vector for longer than I'm pleased to announce, because threat and reward came to us naturally. We think in terms of the brain and brain structures that lead to social behavior. Um, so I'll sort of pull it all together here, as Adrian was saying, Chu. When we're doing a power attempt, we're drawing on one or more of the 12 forms of power. We're not restricted necessarily by the forms of power we may be able to deploy if we have those in the relationship. Power is not a quality of a person, it's a quality of the relationship. And if I feel that I have a lot of forms of power at my disposal, I may use a lot or I may not. These are pre-conscious decisions that we make because all of us are using all 12 of these in the course of living our lives. Um, so we can do threat and reward at the same time. Let me give you a simple example. I did not parent like this, but I could say, hey buddy, clean your room and we'll go for ice cream. Or, but if you don't clean your room, you're grounded, right? Now that would be a threat and reward from a parenting standpoint, legitimate power of being a parent. I'm jumping ahead a little, but you'll get the idea. Um, And so threat and reward could be used together. It could be just, hey, buddy, we're going for ice cream, or it could be, hey, buddy, clean your room or you're grounded. Again, that wasn't my power strategy as a parent, but that's a pretty common one, and it illustrates the point quite well. Um, the neutral is in the withholding or choice not to exercise power. When we come to network power, for instance, which means other people that have power that you may be able to draw upon because they're in your network, maybe I'm counting on Adrian's support when I go to our boss Amir for a raise, and I march in there with him, and I expect Adrian to lend his voice to my voice to shape the boss's reality. That's reality shaping power. Uh, and Adrian at that point looks at Amir, big scary Amir, and chooses not to exercise his power at that moment. And so there's Ted out there, assuming that I'm walking in with more power than I had, because Adrian has chosen to go neutral, right, with his power at that particular moment. I just made that example up on the spot, but I think.
I like that.
Yeah, there you go. So neutral would be, I'm not going to stop you. I'm not going to try to stop you, but I'm not necessarily going to help you either, right? And we see this in terms of international relations, and sort of thing. Hey, we want this coalition of nations to go up against another country because we don't like what that country's done, and those coalitions could everybody could say, yeah, we're in. We're going to lend our power to this initiative, or we could simply say, no, we're not going with you on that one, to whatever country is sort of leading that initiative. Or it could be the other way. No, we're not only we're not going to go with you, we're going to oppose you. We're going to use our power to help the other in the course of that. So it's that's a neutral thing that it would be very helpful to keep in mind as we go. It's the three vectors are critical here to understand that we can threat, reward, and neutral. And we'll give examples in the source forms of threat and reward, and that'll make sense here as we go through. So there's our vectors. Did anybody want to add anything on the vectors?
I'm good.
All right, let's dive into source forms. So five forms, as I said, if you think of them as kind of the Lego bricks that together, you can deploy these in any kind of combination on the source form level, but they also form together to create the other seven forms of social power that we'll be talking about in episode 3 and 4. So we got to get these down and understand where they're coming from and what they're about. So we'll start with resource because it is sort of the most elemental, if you will, because it's about our physical survival, and it's really based on the possession of, or at least access to, material resources that I can leverage towards my intended effect. And these are really basic, like oxygen, food, water, land, shelter, fuel, medicine, weapons, and today the proxy for all of those things tends to be currency, right? So in trading times, pre-currency periods in history, we could exchange food for water, or I could agree that you can have these lands, in exchange for something that I would value from you. And so we're basically exchanging commodities for living, for being alive and keeping us alive. Um, and today even goes past just currency. Oh, well, so and so has more lawyers or better lawyers than you do, right? So that's the sort of the weapon that you use in the contest of courts. Obviously, we have militaries that today have incredibly sophisticated weapons that are originally replacements gradually from fists and clubs to, intercontinental ballistic missiles that might carry a nuclear warhead. Um, we've upped the game in that regard. So that's resource power, and if you have a lot of it, uh, and it's what you have a lot of is desired, then that is an amplification of your resource power. If you have a lot of resources but no one wants it, I am thinking of how many leaves I have in the yard right now that nobody is interested in taking off my hands. You know, I can rake them up, I can put them in bags, and I have to pay somebody to take them away. But if we had a shortage of fuel for making fires, my leaves could suddenly become give me resource power that I didn't have before because of this shortage,
Mm.
right? And so what was a resource form of power at one time may shift on the basis of what, and that says it's all in the relationship and it's all in the context that we're trying to survive. So resource power, survival. And oxygen, you know, is a big deal in some cities that have incredibly bad air quality, and people are dying because of it, right? So oxygen actually is something that we can consider a resource, or something that will purify our the air that we're breathing could become part of resource power as well. So anything to add on that one, gentlemen?
No, I mean, nailed it. And Amir, anything?
I just want to emphasize that the resources you have should be valued by others if you want to use them as a source of power. If others don't care about what you have, your precious resources in your own mind are just waste for others. And sometimes we just forget this very simple fact and just assume that everyone values my resources as much as I do. And that's probably one of the reasons when our attempts to exert our power over others don't work, because just to ourselves we think that we are powerful in that situation or in that interaction, but it's not really about how much we think we are powerful. It's about how much others see us as powerful individuals.
Yeah, exactly. You know, maybe I consider myself wealthy. I don't, but let's say I did, and I was prepared to pay somebody $1 million to do something that you know is undesirable to me. So I'm going to pay somebody $1 million to do this because I've got this kind of resource. And the person though that I'm trying to induce to do this thing is Elon Musk. Right. Well, $1 million. What the hell does he care? Right. He's not worried about that. So it's in the relationship. However, if the person who I am trying to induce my power attempt to use my resource power of, in this case, cash, to get them to do something that I want them to do, and they are impoverished, I have tremendous resource power in that setting. Right. So just to your point, Amir, it's an important one to indicate. Um, I grew up in a family that with a mother who valued, to some degree anyway, Royal Dalton china, and it was an investment. People would get these china figurines, and they were supposed to be incredibly valuable, and everybody compared, you know, who has the most Royal Dalton. And today, I don't think you can give this stuff away. You know, it was this incredible investment at one time that I'm not even sure is, you know, well, it'd be valued by some, but nothing like the way it was
Yeah, like it'd
as
be
I was
super
growing up.
niche now.
Yeah, exactly. So
They
there's
wouldn't have
some
it.
people that want it, but yeah. So it's all in the eye of the beholder, right? That's resource power. Um, so a legitimate power is another one that people almost automatically think of when they're thinking about power. These first two in particular. Um, and so it's about the acceptance of the right or the privilege of an authority figure or group, um, that by virtue of my complementary role in relation to them. So, you know, if I've joined a company, I now have a boss. I am their employee. If I join the military and I am an officer, I am given, you know, a certain number of soldiers to lead, and they have a relationship to me of where I have more legitimate power than they do. They'll be more senior officers than me, but then I am in that position of subordinate to their legitimate power. Teacher student. parent-child, judge to the criminal, government to its citizens. All those kinds of relationships are codified in a particular society or organization of a formal nature. And they are temporary because the minute that I quit that job, that boss no longer has the legitimate power over me because now I'm outside of that company, right? But as long as I was inside, um, we've all taught at University of Windsor, St. Clair College, those kinds of institutions, and so our students have legitimate power, but we have more legitimate power while they're our student. Um, and so I can say we're going to do two exams and a paper to get through this course, and they pretty much have to do it. Their only option is to sign out of the course, right? And then I've lost my legitimate power over them. And certainly the day after the grades go in, I've lost all my legitimate power over them then too. Um, but I don't have unlimited legitimate power because, I could not at any point say to a classroom full of psychology students, okay, we're going to get up and we're going to run 10 laps around this building. That is not going to wash. And no, you're not going to pass this course unless you run 10 laps around this building. They would have every right to go to the department head or the dean and say, this professor that you've assigned to us, having us do things that are not within his legitimate power to do. Maybe if it was an HK prof, right? I was doing human kinetics, I might get away with that, but it would still have to be within the curriculum of the course that I was teaching. So legitimate power is codified. It is also embodied in the practices of these formal groups or collectives through the laws, if they are a state or a province or state or a nation state, policies and procedures for companies and organizations and agencies, collective agreements between union and management is a form of legitimate power. You can't do this according to the collective agreement. Okay, no, we would argue that we can do this according to collective agreement. It is a contract, right? So contracts are included in legitimate power. Also statutes and treaties, anything of that nature is all legitimate power. And so these codified agreements are often the things that give um, the people their legitimate positions and places. Police in their given culture have legitimate power to do certain things, pull us over for speeding, investigate crimes, that sort of thing. But there's limits on their power too, because they can't just pull us over for no reason, at least not in this country. They have to have probable cause. And so, we could use legitimate power to sue the police if we felt that they had, wrongfully detained us for some kind of reason there. So, legitimate power is quite formal in that regard. It's often written down, and with the org chart, when we walk into an organization, will often be shown the org chart. That's a statement of their legitimate power ideal. Of course, then we'll get into saying, because there's 11 other forms of power, how does this org chart really work? And they go, what do you mean? This is how it works. And then we probe a little bit more and they'll say, yeah, actually, you know, all these people are directors, but some of these directors have more power in this organization than others do. And that's part of culture. And that's the other 11 forms of power in play. So it doesn't negate the fact that they're all directors, but it wouldn't be an accurate reflection of how that organization actually functions. So how did I do in that one, gentlemen?
Beautiful.
Got it covered?
Probably it's the most fragile form of power, I think, because it's not based on some real resources you have. So any moment you can lose it. Any moment that people decide that, let's say you're not their president or superior
Yes. Mhm.
anymore, they will simply not care about your title. So,
Yes, and borders between nations are they're not sometimes they're kind of drawn on the ground or there's border checks and things, but you can't see them from space, right? We made them up. we made up the concept of Canada as a nation state,
Mhm.
any nation state, not just this one. So yes, exactly, Amir. If the social order changes, so does the legitimate power. And yeah, so it's kind of a big deal that way. And yeah, social order changes, so does the legitimate power in play, and that changes culture. And we'll come back to that because we'll talk lots about that later. So expert power and information power, not the same thing. You can, if you are an expert, you will have information power, but you can have information power without being an expert. So we'll show you what we mean by that. Expert power is based on the perception of superior knowledge or ability that is possessed by a person or a group, that the person regards as useful or desirable, right? So you've got a diploma, a degree, or multiple of these. You've got professional credentials. You've got your red seal in one or more of the trades. You have won awards. You have X number of years of experience. All of these things are claims to expert power. It doesn't necessarily mean that you know, your expert knowledge will be embraced, because if the group that or the person that you're interfacing with doesn't value what you do or need what you do, well, they may say you got diplomas in the wall, but I'm not giving you any expert power. So yeah, it's a matter of acknowledging the legitimacy of some of those credentials, but it's not just formal credentials that will give rise to expert power. You know, hey, Amir has been doing this for the last 30 years. There's nobody that knows more about it than he does. You know, he's been, you know, processing this particular metal for ever, and nobody is as skilled as he is. But maybe he learned from the ground up. He never took a formal course in metallurgy, but nonetheless is really, really good at managing and getting a pure, you know, composition of that. Um, so expert power doesn't have to come from the formal, yeah, credentials and that kind of thing. Um, what would you gentlemen add?
There's always that funny example I like to add about one of my first big public speaking experiences with you.
Yeah,
So Ted and I and Amir were, you know, in front of 2 to 400 people, and yeah, Ted was, talking about either social power or one of the other many things that we train on, and at that time, Ted was like, I want you to, share your knowledge more, like you have a lot that's worth sharing, and while he was up there, he just kind of went like, yeah, and Adrian, explain the brain, right? And then, but the way that he handed off the microphone to me was he basically primed the audience that I'm like an expert, right? So he essentially rewarded me this expert power, and the director of brain shenanigans thing that my team calls me.
yep,
And yeah, it was a really great example, right? So like he framed me as the expert in the relationship with this room, right? And that's how the form of power existed. And I was terrified to speak in front of all these people, and it went really well. And yeah, now I keep talking. So
well,
I think it's the only power that's really up to you to make it. I mean, you have more control over it. Still, people should perceive you and see that expertise in you,
yes.
but you can do very much to objectively increase it and really make it hard for people not to see your power.
Yes, that's very true, Amir. Yeah, absolutely. You know, right now, if you're listening and learning about social power, you're increasing your expert power, as it turns out, right? You'll know more about human dynamics by understanding social power, and so it's a incremental way, but nonetheless, that's what's happening. Yeah. So I mentioned that information power is not quite the same thing, but that experts do have information power. Um, Information power is much more transient. It is not based on formal credentials or things like that necessarily, although it can come from that source. So when we go to an expert, we are typically going for information power that we ascribe to an expert. But essentially, all it's based on is that there's a perception that a person or a group has information that I don't have that I view as useful or desirable. And so let's look at the news media. So the news media, the journalists are trained, they're experts in gathering information, but what are they really producing? New information. They've got to go out every day and they've got to track down what's happening with various stories or discover a story, bring that back to the parent of that outlet for news information. Meteorologists are experts at interpreting weather data, or even getting weather data, never mind just interpreting it. And we, go to my weather app to find out, is it a good day for hiking or kayaking today or not, right? Database holders are trying to keep data and restrict it to only those who have authorization to have it. And there's other people out there that want that information. They want your credit card information so they can hack you. Um, that's information power there too. Spies are trained experts in spycraft, but they're not very much use unless they're using spycraft to go out there and get timely information that will help their particular government, or if it's corporate espionage, I guess their particular corporation, with information that they wish to have to give them an advantage over an opponent. So those are some of the most common ones that are semi or actually institutionalized. But a lot of information power is absolutely delivered informally. And I know we're going to have an interesting little sidebar about this one, but workplace gossip, that's information power. It doesn't mean that what's in the workplace gossip system is actually true or accurate or fair, but nonetheless, people in organizations use information power um, quite effectively and dramatically towards their intended effects. I know who's getting the promotion. Now, I'm not even the one who decides that, but maybe I just saw a memo, or I'm using this to draw people's attention to me, and hopefully they'll go, oh, who's getting it, right? Of course, if they don't care, they say, I'll wait for the memo to come out. Then they're rejecting my information power attempt. Um, I know who's dating who in the workplace. Oh, what's going on? Who's dating who? Or I don't care. It's none of my business. So nice little examples there of a power attempt that might not work, or it might very well work. Um, so, but Amir, this is one I like to bounce to you about the other side of workplace gossip. You want to
Mm.
talk about that?
Yeah, when we hear the word gossip, it's a very negative word. Like, we don't want people to gossip, like, or talk behind each other's back. But we have something called pro-social gossip or positive gossip. So gossip could be constructive, like when let's say you talk to your friend about the tough times that your other colleague is going through, and you're saying that, for example, okay, this person needs some help with their workload, or when you say something that uh, people become aware that another individual maybe need help, need more support, or something that they would appreciate if they receive from their colleagues. So it's not just about saying like negative things behind people's back, or trying to like undermine them. If it's positive, in some situations it could be actually very helpful, and it can boost the morale in the whole organization.
Absolutely. That's very well put. Um, you know, uh, I do remember a time in my past career where you know I'd been through some rough stuff personally, and only one of my team members back then, this is much earlier in my career, was aware of it. But what he sort of did was he gently made others aware that maybe Ted isn't on the top of his game right now. and they kind of wrapped around me and without making it obvious, would chime in if I was missing something. This was during a tense mediation that we were doing, and my issue was outside of that, but the team really wrapped around and said, okay, maybe this isn't Ted's best day, but we're going to make sure that the client doesn't know that, and because we've got expertise we can bring to the table, and they did, and I felt so supported and so grateful. When I reflect on it, I kind of, well, I might tear up just a little bit, but that's an example of very, very pro-social information power. I didn't want to burden the team with my own stuff, but uh, this member of the team took it upon themselves to just say, hey, we got his back, and so it was super helpful and very gratifying, as you said, Amir. Um, so, so that's information power. It's I've got a secret. It's a stock tip, right? And that's why insider trading is illegal. You're not supposed to, tell everybody, hey, the stock is about to go through the roof because it's going to, get, this big technological advancement or something like that. Um, and so not all information power would be legal to use. There's an example of it being, the legitimate power sources would say insider trading is not legal, and there's consequences to that. You can go to jail for utilizing information that's not yours to be used that way. Um, so it's transient, right? Once you share something like that, you there may be something that you got back from that, maybe just status, or oh, you're in the know, you're tapped into the organization, or you know what's going on inside the family, that sort of thing. So there's lots of ways that that can be a payoff for you, and sometimes it's the only form of power that people feel that they have when they're in a relatively uh, low end of the organizational pyramid, if you will. Yeah, but we've got the gossip, and it may be again pro-social or antisocial kinds of gossip. Much of it is can be very, very negative. And again, I think I started out by saying this, but the information doesn't have to be true to be valued. And in fact, sometimes the lies are valued more than a truth is. So it's just information. It's not about accuracy on this level. Um, I think that's a good point to make as well. So anything you'd add, gentlemen?
That was really well put.
There you go. So that's the first four. And so the last of the source forms is one that's a little bit, well, they're all different from each other for sure, but um, this one is unique in that it is the only form of power. What I'm going to be talking about is referent power. That is has to be at least in one direction experienced personally. It is the power of liking, loving, respect, admiration. Um, on the one side, that would be sort of the positive expression, not the reward expression necessarily. I would get into negative and positive as opposed to reward and threat later on. But I really like this person. I really admire this person. I'm really attracted to this person. Whatever that dynamic is, but there's that draw that I'm experiencing that is giving you that positive referent power. And it can be also the other way, which is, jealousy, resentment, dislike, hatred, disgust or contempt, and even fear of somebody, which would be negative referent power. Oh God, the minute they walk into the room, there's a chill that comes over everybody. Everybody hates this person. Um, and so it is all about some very powerful emotional experiences that people have, and it could be reciprocated. You lock eyes with this person for the first time, and they're immediately drawn to you, and you're immediately drawn to them, and it's that whole love at first sight kind of dynamic. Or it could be non-reciprocated. you're drawn to that person, but they're not necessarily drawn to you. Um, and it's not just physical attractiveness. I don't want to, somebody who's really funny has high referent power. People tend to like to be around people that have a good sense of humor. People who have great ideas or have a lot of an energy and enthusiasm can really draw people to them. The word charisma is one that isn't necessarily associated with as a form of power, but this is charisma as a subset of referent power. There can be other reasons why somebody is has referent power with somebody else. So it's a big sort of category, but it all is about that desire to be around this person or maybe to emulate them. And the emulating is really what sells running shoes or any product, because this is what the marketers figured out a long time ago. If this particular sports hero, is really loved by a lot of people, get them to wear your running shoes. Because if they're wearing their running shoes, then those people who want to be like that sports hero are more likely to buy those particular pairs of running shoes. And the sports hero will never know them, right? It does not have to be reciprocated. Oh, I would go to that movie anytime because my favorite, actor is in that film. Or it could go there. Oh, I just hate seeing that actor. I can't even watch a film they're in. I'm not going to that film. I don't care how good it is. Um, and it could be neutral. It could be, I go to the film. I'm indifferent about the actors. I hope they're good, but I'm not particularly, I don't have referent power, positive or negative, in relation to them. So the person that we're giving referent power to, negative or positive, does not have to reciprocate it. The powerful politicians who are popular, and that may change. They may at some point not be possess positive referent power. It could go the other way. Indeed, our past Prime Minister Trudeau was much loved by many Canadians at the outset of his. I think it was almost 10 years he was in the prime ministership, but was not particularly popular on the other side of that, and that happens to politicians a lot. Happens to leaders and organizations quite frequently. It can go the other way too. Somebody can come in and everybody's wary of them, but they find out, no, this leader is really effective. Really, we really, you know, feel that they respect us, so we offer that respect back. So yeah, it could be any kind of dynamic. And before I get into the relationship to trust and mistrust, because that's what it links directly to, what am I forgetting, my friends?
Well, reference powers, it's a lot of enjoyment for me personally because I think you mentioned like the humor thing, and like humor is something that I rely on so much, right?
Yep.
But then also referent power, it's it's so powerful because think of like when you're I don't know, like just when you go to like gift giving, right?
Hmm.
Holidays and all the people that you want to just kind of do acts of kindness for in your personal life, right? Though all of those people have referent power over you technically, and you usually have, you know, referent power over them as well, right? So it's a lot of our positive relationships is bidirectional referent power.
Yes.
So yeah, it's really cool. But Amir, is anything you
Yeah,
want to touch on there?
I'd say referent power really should be a must-have in your toolbox or power box.
Hmm.
Any other
A
form of
power box.
yeah, I think any other form of power without referent power will work against you eventually. Like if you have a lot of other forms of power, let's say you have a lot of resource power, for example, if you are very rich, or if you have a lot of expert power, for example, if you are a Nobel Prize winner, but you don't have referent power, people will be jealous of you. People will try to discount the importance of your other forms of power. Oh, he knows nothing. Like, oh, he just copied his this dissertation, for example, things like
Hmm.
that.
Yeah.
And they can become very creative in doing that. So I'd say the secret to remain powerful for a long time is referent power.
That's really well put. And a negative referent power can diminish your other forms, like you're saying, right? Um, I'll bring in the example of a physician here, um, for a number of reasons. If you want to be healthier, make sure that your physician has good bedside manner. That is, what they call in medical circles, I guess, what we call social intelligence. They know how to make you comfortable. They know how to respond when you're maybe revealing something you're uncomfortable about, and they make it okay for you to tell them the whole symptomology that you're experiencing. Studies have been done that demonstrate that if you like your physician, positive referent power, um, it doesn't make them a better physician than they are objectively. They have legitimate power as a physician because they have a medical license. They've got degrees that qualify them for that. They've done the exams. That's fine. But if you like your physician, you'll have better health outcomes, because there's sort of three tiers to this. On the one hand, you'll go when you need to more readily. Um, Honey, you've had trouble with your knee for 2 weeks. Why aren't you going in and seeing, our physician? Oh, he's just going to get on me about my weight and all the rest, and I just don't want to hear it anymore. If it gets worse, I'll go in another 2 weeks or something, right? Maybe it'll get better. Well, we all know that early intervention in any kind of health situation is better than waiting. And so, honey, why don't you go in and get your knee checked out? Yeah, you're right. I should. I get an amazing physician. He's fantastic. I never hesitate to go see my physician. Then once you're there, you're going to be more inclined to be more honest about, maybe I'm uncomfortable with some of my symptoms. I don't want to acknowledge them. And that doesn't give the physician the full scope of what's going on. And you've sort of withheld data because you're not comfortable with this person. Um, and maybe we're even mistrustful of this person, which would be negative referent power. So you'll share more of what's going on, and then after that, the physician gives you a regimen of antibiotics. They'll say, don't stop taking these pills until the bottle is empty. If you stop when you just start to feel better, you could create a superbug and you could get sicker and it'll be harder to treat you. So, oh, okay. Well, my physician wouldn't lead me astray. I'm going to take all the pills in the bottle versus, hey, I feel better. What's he know, right? And there's the diminishment of the expert power because I don't like this person. They have low referent power. So you have, better health comes for you if have this positive referent power with your physician. And by the way, I just gave you an example of reward and threat vector power that is not motivated by any malintent. In other words, we often think that threats are always being delivered out of somebody's intention to um, get you to do what they want you to do out of fear of them, but that's not always the case. Nor is it always the case that a reward is a welcome inducement, right? The reward factor of power. So let me give you an example of the physician who only has your best intention, your best outcomes in mind when they say, take all of the pills in this bottle, finish them all, and you'll get better. So there is expert power assuring you that these little white tablets that I don't know what's in them will get rid of whatever ails me in this moment. And then they'll say, but don't stop taking them when you feel better because you can create a superbug. Now they're using the threat vector, but they're not threatening me to induce me to do something that I wouldn't want to do. They're trying to help me make good choices about my own health by giving me the reward, I'll get better, and the threat, but you could get sicker. And there is the idea that a threat based expression of any of the 12 forms of power is not always about control, manipulation, abuse. It can be, absolutely. But there can be other ways to abuse even with reward power, right? So I could um, offer you a lot of resource power or some of my resource power in the form of money. But if I come from a nefarious background and you don't trust how I earn my money, you may think I'm, involved in organized crime or something like that. Maybe you don't even want that money. You don't want it to be, offered to you. No, thanks. You keep your money. I don't want it. Because there may be some kind of hook too. Well, you've taken my money. Now you owe me. So a reward could be rejected, a threat could be embraced. Like, oh yeah, I'm going to take all the pills in this bottle because I want to get better and I don't want to get sicker. So there's a lot of stuff that we brought forward in that, and how, to Amir, your point, referent power amplifies the other forms of
Mhm.
power in some really big ways, and also diminishes if it's negative referent power, like you were saying. What's this person know, right?
Mhm.
We love it when somebody we love is right, and we hate it when somebody we love is wrong. Oh God, or inversely, when somebody we
Mm.
hate is right. Oh, I hate it when they're right. They're, you know, but they're right. I got to acknowledge that. But I'm trying to withhold expert power because I don't like this person. So referent power, because it is so personal, is what we would call like JADO, jet assisted takeoff to the other forms of power, um, either in the positive way or negative way. How to, and then I'll come back to trust and mistrust. I've been mentioning it, but I'll come to that. But do you guys have something to add?
No, I'm kind of pumped for trust and mistrust, but Amir, anything from you?
I'm just thinking like all the training workshops and courses that are meant to teach you soft skills of any
Mm-hmm.
kind ultimately
It's
are trying to teach you how to increase your referent power.
yes,
So people really understand the importance of referent power, although they may use other terms to refer to it, basically.
yes, yeah, and we would frame it as a derivative of developing your emotional and your social intelligence. Um, so the more that you're doing that, like listening to this podcast, because everything that we bring to the workplace or to what we do is helping people develop their emotional and social intelligence, becoming aware of how power works, for instance. Um, so emotional intelligence is your self-awareness of your own emotions and your ability to self-regulate them. And social intelligence is your ability to understand and recognize emotions in others and have an appropriate response to that emotional state that they're in. And these, they don't necessarily co-vary. You could be high on one and lower on the other. The good news about these forms of intelligence is you can always increase them, and that is increasing your referent power. Um, your ability to relate to people well tends to be very much a foundation of whether people come to give you positive referent power or not. If I have a bad experience with somebody, how anxious am I going to be to sit down and talk to them again? I may actually actively avoid that person in the workplace just because it was, I felt disrespected. I don't know how it's going to be sitting down with them at any given time. So positive and negative referent power, big deals, and they are the only form of power that we understand to be able to account for trust and mistrust. I may have confidence in my physician, right, that they're well trained, but that doesn't mean I trust them with information. They're competent, but are they trustworthy? Are they going to guard the information that I give them about myself the way that I wish them to? So trust and mistrust is all about how I expect somebody to use their power in relation to me. Are they going to use their power to assist me or at least not block me, right? They'll only use their power in ways that are focused on the mission that we're here to accomplish together if this is a workplace team. Or are they going to use their power to block my efforts or make me look poor or ineffective or what have you? So that's the basis of trust, is how do I expect you to use your power in relation to me? And it doesn't mean that I automatically assume you're going to lend me all your power. Um, maybe you'll just give me a little bit of advice and let me go at it with the power that I have. Or you'll say, hey, I have total confidence in you. Get out there and make your pitch, and I'll be in the audience watching you. You know, um, so trust and mistrust foundational to all relationship. One of the things that the brain is sizing up very quickly, can I trust this person or not? This gets into all kinds of other dynamics like in group, out group, which we'll be talking about in our next episode too. But because if you're in my in group, I automatically give you a measure of trust, maybe not total trust right off the bat, but maybe a measure of trust. If you've ever been in another country and you have your national flag on your backpack or on your jacket, and somebody else from your home country sees you standing in line, oh, you're from country X, then you strike up a conversation. But had that indicator of in-groupness not been there, you may never have met, right? And that's where the referent power very much can suggest this person might be more trustworthy until proven otherwise, or could go the other way. Oh, I don't trust anybody from that company or that nation or what have you, right? It has the seeds of discrimination built into it as well. We'll come to that in the course of our discussions on power because that's what it's all about. Um, so yeah, and this gets at betrayal as well, right? This person would never betray me. Oh my gosh, they betrayed me. And so betrayal is a big deal for the brain. No brain likes to be betrayed. And brains really find it rewarding to say, I'm absolutely loyal to this person. This person I trust, with my life. Um, and those are big statements that people will make because they're all around referent power. Um, so yeah, what are you at, gentlemen?
That was just really, really soothing the way that you put that. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how else to explain it. Yeah, I was just thinking about something Amir said earlier of how, referent power is like such a necessary point to maybe even start to look at other forms of power, right? Within a
Mhm.
person. And I thought of an example, as we wrap up here. My partner, I mean you guys know this, but my for the audience, my partner went skydiving not too long ago. And it was a pretty nerve-wracking thing for me because we're just kind of like looking up this place, and we get there and I'm like, oh my god, she's gonna jump out of an airplane. And we got there, and what made me so comfortable was the like the skydiving instructors, or I don't know what they're called, but the skydiving people that would be
Called jump masters, but there you go. Yeah,
the jump masters. Ooh, look at that.
yeah.
That's another title. See, of expert power. And they were so good, like they were so charismatic, and they were funny, and they were like so sure of themselves. And honestly, the way they just interacted with us, and like, it made me so comfortable and trust them. And then I started to look at their expert power and their legitimate power, right? I'm like, these people are licensed professionals, and expert power, they've done this, they do, I don't know, like
Hundreds, even thousands of
hundreds in a
shows.
day, right? Like
Well, not in a day, but yeah,
maybe
yeah,
not, yeah.
multiple. Yeah,
But like, yeah, multiple times per day. And yeah, and it was just cool. So like, it just kind of, it's funny how for me in that situation, the power dynamics just kind of compounded, right? It started with the referent power, and then I thought about the legitimate power, and then I thought about the expert power, right?
yeah,
And ultimately led into a composite form, just a taste, which then, the composite form being multiple of the source forms put together, was reality shaping power, right? Which shaped my overall reality. But we'll save that for next episode because that's where we're going to go next.
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, Amir, any closing comments before we
It's very interesting that I think to some extent, referent power is in the eye of the beholder too. Like
Oh
when
Oh,
yeah.
yeah,
people
for sure.
really need to find someone powerful, when they're desperate, when they really need help, oxytocin goes high, and when oxytocin is high, we tend to look for people we can trust, and that actually makes us more basically sensitive to referent power somehow.
Absolutely. Yeah, for the good and not. And I wanted to cap this off because a lot of our discussions need to be in this podcast need to be and will be about the abuse of power. And some individuals, those who would score high on one or more of the dark personality traits, the dark tetrad that we'll be discussing at great length in coming episodes, um, are wired to abuse power, to use it for self-serving ends, and to exploit other people and their power in the course of getting what they want. Um, and so they will often frame and be welcome negative referent power. They take pride in being feared and despised. They feel powerful because of that. And they'll often say, people respect me. And of course, looking at this from the standpoint of psychology, we'd say, no, people fear you. Respect is not the same as fear. They just fear
Yeah.
you. And they tend to be, well, that's fine, whatever you want to call it. I get my way. And this is foreshadowing around reputation-oriented power in 2 episodes from now. But people who are wired to abuse power, and unfortunately, about 15% of the power of the population is absolutely going to try to get more power and exploit that power when they get it. So they will relate to these forms. So they'll be using the same 12 forms, but they'll use them differently. And we'll have lots to say about that coming up. Because, well, I opened this with the discussion that, well, we try to be lighthearted as we talk about this heavy concept. This really is at the root of everything that human beings have created that is magnificent and wonderful and incredibly laudable, and is also lies at the very heart of the worst that humanity is capable of doing to one another and to other species and the planet. So, um, yeah, it, we'll be going into personality. We'll be going into these traits once we get through the 12 forms. We've been through the vectors tonight, and they apply to all of the coming 7 forms,
Mhm.
as much as they do these 5. And we will go into the composite forms, which are combinations of these 5. That's why we need to understand these 5 before we get into the combinations. So that's what we'll go next time. And yeah, the world is in a tough place, and I hope we can use these insights into social power to maybe encourage its ethical deployment and to recognize when it's not being deployed ethically. We'll have a lot to say on that coming up. So, any parting comments, gentlemen?
I mean,
No.
my one thing is just, speaking of oxytocin, whenever Amir wears a turtleneck, my oxytocin just goes through the roof. Um, that's really all I can say about
That's
Uh,
you're, you I don't even know what to say about that.
I
Yes.
But thank you everyone for joining us tonight in the Social Power Lab. We're Vogue's leadership group. Please feel free to follow us on LinkedIn. Check out vokesleadershipgroup.com. We have lots of good stuff there. We'll be posting our episodes there as well as YouTube and Spotify, all the good channels that you can find us. And yeah, please like, subscribe, comment. We'd love to hear from you. Love to get to know you and discuss this more. So yeah, this is Vogue's Leadership Group, always standing by, and we'll see you next time.
I'm oxytocin all over the place, gentlemen. Like
Oh my
it's the hug drug. No, we'll talk about that too. See y'all next time.
See you all. Bye.
God. Bye bye. Thank you for listening to the Social Power Lab podcast. Make sure you join us next week as we continue to uncover the hidden dynamics of social power all around us, because every conversation changes the world one interaction at a time. You can listen to the Social Power Lab podcast on Spotify under Social Power Lab, on YouTube under Social Power Lab _VLG, and on LinkedIn under Vokes Leadership Group. Thank you and have a wonderful day. This podcast was produced by Trenton Vokes. The theme was produced and written by Adrian Deschamps.